In the heart of a blizzard where every sound is swallowed by snow, a little girl and her loyal German shepherd stumble upon a secret buried by the government and forgotten by faith. What began as a search for shelter becomes a battle between science, guilt, and grace. Would you have followed the dog that led you into the storm if it meant saving a town that never knew your name? Tell us where you are watching from, and stay until the end, because what they discover beneath the mountain will change what you believe about miracles. The wind howled like a wounded creature across the valley of Mountain Hollow, a forgotten town tucked between the spines of the Rocky Mountains. It was midwinter, and the streets lay buried under white silence. Rooftops sagged beneath snow, cars half buried, and every window flickered faintly like tired eyes trying to stay awake through the storm. On the outskirts, past the frozen gas station and the church whose bell no longer rang, a small figure struggled against the storm. Clara Wren, 10 years old, thin as a candle in the wind, trudged forward with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her cheeks were raw from cold. Her eyes, large and gray-blue, held both fear and a stubborn spark that refused to die. Life had never given her much warmth. Her mother had died of pneumonia when Clara was 6, and her father had disappeared into the oil fields 2 winters later. Since then, she'd learned to talk to silence, to live by instinct, and to trust only one creature in the world, Shadow. Shadow was a German shepherd, about 5 years old, large-bodied and noble, his coat dark sable with streaks of silver running down his back like traces of frost. His eyes were amber, alert but gentle, carrying a strange intelligence that sometimes unsettled strangers. He wasn't like other dogs. He obeyed without command, noticed things no one else did. And when Clara cried at night, he would rest his head on her lap and let out a low, comforting hum. To her, Shadow was home. That night, the storm had come without warning. Snowfall turned into white fury, and the temperature dropped fast enough to freeze breath mid-air. Clara had been sleeping in an abandoned shed by the railway, but when the roof began to creak under the snow's weight, Shadow growled and nudged her until she packed up their few belongings: a tin cup, a wool scarf, and a broken flashlight. Together, they pushed through the streets of Mountain Hollow, searching for shelter. Every corner of the town was ghost-like. The bakery, where Clara sometimes stole stale rolls, had its door chained. The pharmacy lights flickered weakly behind metal shutters. The only sounds were the crunch of Shadow's paws and the distant hum of power lines trembling in the wind. Suddenly, Shadow froze. His ears pricked forward, and a low growl vibrated in his chest. Clara stopped, pressing a mittened hand to his neck. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. The dog's nose lifted to the air. Then he bolted into a narrow alley between 2 frozen apartment blocks. Clara followed, stumbling through snowdrifts that reached her knees. The alley was a world of shadows, dumpsters half buried, icicles hanging like knives, and the faint glow of a red light blinking through the snow. Then she saw them. 2 figures lay crumpled near the wall, half covered by snow. Both wore black tactical uniforms with FBI insignias half torn by ice. One was a woman, maybe mid-30s, with cropped dark hair and a sharp, angular face, now pale as marble, Agent Nora Hale. Even unconscious, she looked disciplined, her posture straight even in collapse. The other was a man, older, early 40s, with a square jaw and a fading scar across his cheek. Agent Ethan Cole, known once for his unshakable calm in crises. His eyes fluttered weakly, foam gathering at his lips. Clara gasped. "Oh no! They're hurt!" She knelt beside them, trying to shake Nora's shoulder. "Ma'am, sir, can you hear me?" The woman's eyelids trembled but did not open. Shadow sniffed their gloves, then barked sharply, stepping between Clara and the bodies. The air smelled strange, metallic and sour, like spoiled fruit. The red light came from a small tracking beacon half buried in snow. Clara didn't know what it was, but she knew enough to recognize danger. She pulled her scarf tighter around her face and yelled into the wind, "Help! Somebody, please!" Her voice vanished into the storm. Miles away, Sheriff Marcus Harlan was on his midnight patrol. At 50, Marcus carried the weariness of a man who had buried both his faith and his laughter. Broad-shouldered, with graying hair and a mustache that failed to hide the sadness in his eyes, he had once been a kind man, until a gas explosion 3 years ago took his wife and only daughter. Since then, he lived like a ghost, driving the same snowy roads night after night, pretending duty was the same as purpose. When he heard the faint sound of a child screaming through the radio static, something stirred in him. He slammed on the brakes, grabbed his flashlight, and followed the echo down the alley behind Hollow Street Diner. The beam of his light sliced through the snow, and there she was, a little girl, barely 10, clutching a large German shepherd beside two fallen agents. For a split second, Marcus froze. The image hit him like a blow. That small figure in the storm reminded him too much of his own daughter, Emma, the way she used to wait by the porch in her red coat before the explosion changed everything. He rushed forward. "Hey, you there! Step back from them!" His voice was firm but not unkind. Clara turned, eyes wide with fear. "They're dying," she said. "Please, help them." Marcus dropped to his knees beside Nora, checked her pulse, faint but present. Ethan's was weaker, his skin clammy and lips blue. Foam still bubbled at the corners of his mouth. Poison, Marcus realized. Not from food or drink, something weaponized. "Dispatch, this is Harlan. I need paramedics at Hollow Street, alley between 5th and Main. 2 federal agents down, possible chemical poisoning," he barked into his radio. The response crackled through static. "Copy that, Sheriff. Ambulance en route. ETA 8 minutes. Marcus looked at Clara again. Her face was numb from the cold, lashes tipped with ice. "You did good, kid," he said. "You found them in time." Clara just shook her head. "Shadow did. He led me. Here." Marcus turned his flashlight on the dog. The animal stood perfectly still, watching him with golden eyes that seemed almost human. The sheriff had seen hundreds of dogs in his career, but none like this one. There was discipline in the way Shadow held himself. Shoulders squared, gaze unwavering. "What's his name?" Marcus asked. "Shadow," Clara whispered. "He's all I have." Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder. The wind eased just enough for Marcus to shrug off his coat and drape it over Clara's shoulders. "You're freezing," he said. "I'm okay," she murmured, but her teeth chattered. "Will they live?" Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he pressed 2 fingers against Ethan's neck again, counting seconds. The pulse was still there, weak, but there. "They will if help gets here fast enough." Shadow gave a low whine and licked Clara's glove, sensing her fear. Then, suddenly his ears twitched. He turned sharply toward the end of the alley, growling deep in his chest. Marcus followed the gaze, only snow and swirling shadows. Nothing else. Yet, for a heartbeat, he thought he saw movement. A tall figure in the distance, watching them before vanishing into the storm. When the paramedics arrived, chaos filled the alley, flashing red and blue lights painting the snow like stained glass. Clara watched as the agents were lifted onto stretchers, oxygen masks pressed over their faces. Nora stirred faintly, whispering something that sounded like Aurora. But the words were swallowed by the wind. Marcus turned to Clara once more. "You're coming with me, all right? We'll get you warm, get your dog checked too." Clara hesitated, clutching Shadow's fur. "Will they be okay?" "I'll do everything I can," Marcus said softly. Then, after a pause, "You remind me of someone I used to know." He didn't explain further. Instead, he led them toward his patrol car, lights cutting through the storm like a path to safety. Shadow walked between them, his tail low but steady, a guardian forged by both man and miracle. As the car pulled away, the camera of fate lingered on the empty alley, the spot where the agents had fallen, now just 2 shallow depressions in the snow. The red light of the tracking beacon blinked once more, then went dark. Somewhere high above Mountain Hollow, the blizzard began to break. For a moment, the clouds parted, and a single ray of pale light touched the town below, weak but enduring, like hope returning to a heart that had forgotten how to beat. Morning crept slowly over Mountain Hollow, the snow still falling, but gentler now, as if the storm had spent its anger in the night. The small town lay wrapped in a hushed gray light. In the distance, the church bell finally rang for the first time in weeks, a hollow sound drifting through the cold like a prayer that almost froze before reaching heaven. Inside St. Helena Medical Center, a low hum of machines replaced the howling wind. Fluorescent lights glowed against white walls, the scent of antiseptic mixed with faint traces of coffee and exhaustion. Clara Wren sat in the waiting area, her thin legs dangling off the chair, The blanket Sheriff Marcus had given her still wrapped around her shoulders. Her hair was damp from melted snow, sticking to her forehead. Shadow lay curled beside her feet, a silent guardian, his tail thumping faintly each time she shifted. The German shepherd had been unusually quiet since dawn, his sharp eyes scanning every corner of the room, as though reading invisible signals only he could understand. Across the hall, Marcus spoke quietly with Dr. Lena Brooks, the town's only full-time physician. Lena was in her late 30s, tall, slender, with a streak of gray through her chestnut hair, and a calm voice that carried authority without harshness. Her eyes were soft but tired, framed by faint lines of someone who had seen too many small-town tragedies. Car crashes on icy roads, miners with lungs full of dust, widows holding hands in hospital corridors. She was known for her patience and her quiet faith. Marcus removed his hat, brushing snow from the brim. "How are they?" Lena glanced at the chart in her hands. "They're stable, for now. The woman, Agent Hale, is responding to the antitoxin. The man, Cole, isn't waking yet, but the seizures have stopped. Whatever they were exposed to wasn't common poison. It's engineered." "Engineered?" Marcus repeated. Lena nodded. "The chemical markers look synthetic, military grade. I've sent samples to the state lab, but—" She lowered her voice. "Sheriff, I think this is bigger than anything we've dealt with here." Marcus sighed, rubbing a hand over his tired face. "It's always the quiet towns that get dragged into storms they don't deserve." Lena hesitated. "What about the girl?" He looked toward Clara. "Found her in the alley with the dog. Says she's been living on the street since autumn. Tough little thing. Reminds me of—" He stopped himself. "I'll handle her care for now." Lena followed his gaze, her expression softening. "That dog of hers, something's off about him." Marcus frowned. "Off how?" "Come see." They walked into the small examination room where Shadow lay on the floor, alert but still. Clara stood beside him protectively. When Lena approached, Shadow tensed, but Clara touched his back gently. "It's okay, boy. She's helping." Lena crouched, moving slowly. "You've got quite a partner here, Clara." "He's the bravest dog in the world," the girl said proudly. "He saved those people." "I believe it," Lena replied with a faint smile. She reached out, parting the thick fur behind Shadow's left ear. Beneath it, faintly visible under the skin, was a small metallic tattoo, K9AU91. The numbers shimmered in the light, surrounded by a faint scar pattern. "What's that?" Clara asked. Lena sat back on her heels. "It's a government marking, K9 unit designation. See the AU? That's the Aurora Project prefix." Marcus blinked. "Aurora Project? That old ghost story?" Lena stood, brushing off her knees. "Not a ghost story, Marcus. A classified defense experiment. They train genetically enhanced canines for hazardous missions, chemical detection, biowarfare rescue. Supposedly, the project was shut down 5 years ago, after a containment failure killed dozens of researchers." Clara looked from one adult to the other, confusion flickering in her eyes. "You mean he belonged to them?" "I'm afraid so," Lena said softly. "But dogs like Shadow aren't supposed to be out here. They were all terminated after the incident." Clara wrapped her arms around Shadow's neck, holding him tight. "No, he's mine. He found me. He's not like that." Marcus's jaw tightened. He could see the fear trembling in the girl's voice, the same kind of fear he'd heard in his own when he lost his family. "No one's taking him away," he said firmly. "Not while I'm here." Lena met his eyes but said nothing. She placed a gentle hand on Clara's shoulder. "Then, take good care of him, sweetheart. Whatever happened to him before you found him, it wasn't his fault." As Lena turned away, Shadow gave a faint growl, low, protective, but then licked Clara's hand, calming again. The warmth between them filled the cold hospital room with something fragile but alive. Later that afternoon, Marcus drove Clara and Shadow to the sheriff's office for questioning, routine, but also a way to keep them safe. Snow flurries drifted past the window like falling ash. Clara watched the world blur by, her reflection in the glass merging with Shadow's. "Do you miss your family?" she asked suddenly. Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Every day." "My mom used to say God watches from the quiet places," Clara whispered. "Do you think he still watches this town?" Marcus hesitated, his throat thick. If he does, he's got a strange way of showing it. When they arrived, he set her up with a cup of cocoa and a blanket in his office. Shadow lay near the heater, eyes half closed, but ears always alert. For the first time in years, Marcus felt something stir, a flicker of life in the emptiness he'd carried since his daughter's death. The peace didn't last. A call came in from the hospital. Marcus answered, his tone instinctively sharp. "Harlan, Sheriff, it's Dr. Brooks. Agent Hale just woke up." Marcus was there within minutes. Nora Hale lay pale against the sheets, an oxygen tube under her nose, her dark eyes sharp despite exhaustion. She tried to sit up, but Lena eased her back. "Take it easy," Marcus said. "You're lucky to be alive." "Where's Agent Cole?" Nora rasped. "Still unconscious. You're safe. Found you in the alley. The kid and her dog did." Something flickered in her eyes. "The dog," she swallowed. "German Shepherd?" "Yeah." Her expression darkened. "That's impossible. All Aurora canines were destroyed." Lena glanced at Marcus uneasily. "She's right. I saw the tag myself." Nora looked at Marcus, voice barely above a whisper. "If that dog's alive, then so is the man who made him." Marcus frowned. "Who?" "Dr. Reiner," she said. "Head of Aurora Project. He vanished after the lab explosion. We thought he died with the others." Nora's hands trembled as she spoke. "Before I blacked out, I saw him. The scar on his neck. I'd recognize it anywhere. He said, 'You can't bury the truth forever.' Then there was smoke, gas. After that, nothing." Marcus stepped closer. "You think he's behind this poisoning?" She nodded weakly. "If Reiner's back, he's not done with Aurora. He'll use whatever's left, dogs, agents, anyone, to finish what he started." Silence filled the room. Outside, the snow began to fall harder again, thick flakes swirling against the glass. From the hallway, Clara's voice echoed faintly. "Sheriff?" Marcus turned. Clara stood there holding Shadow's leash. "He's acting strange," she said nervously. Shadow's body was rigid, fur bristling. His eyes glowed a deeper amber under the fluorescent lights. He began to emit a low, guttural sound. Not a growl, but something mechanical, almost like a word in another language. Lena froze. "Marcus, that's German." "What's he saying?" She hesitated. "A command phrase, something from their training protocols. It means target acquired." Clara backed up, her small hands shaking on the leash. "Shadow, stop! It's me!" The dog blinked, head jerking slightly as if fighting invisible wires in his mind. Then, with a whimper, he collapsed at her feet, panting heavily. Marcus crouched beside them, heart racing. "He's not dangerous, right?" Lena shook her head slowly. "No. I think he's conflicted. It's like part of him remembers who he was trained to be, and part of him remembers who he's become." Clara knelt, stroking Shadow's muzzle. "You're not a weapon," she whispered. "You're my friend." The dog exhaled shakily, pressing his head against her palm. From the doorway, Nora watched in silence. "He's fighting it," she murmured, "like the rest of us." The storm outside thickened again, coating the windows in white. In that fragile silence, 4 lives stood at the edge of a truth too big for their small town, one that whispered through the wind a single name: Aurora. And though none of them knew it yet, the blizzard had only just begun. Night had settled over Mountain Hollow like a shroud of ash and glass. The snowstorm had eased, but a sharp wind still prowled through the empty streets, rattling the loose signs and whispering through the pine trees like something that refused to die. Inside Sheriff Marcus's cabin, a small wooden house on the edge of town, the lights flickered softly. It smelled of pine, coffee, and the faint scent of wet fur. Clara Wren sat cross-legged on the worn couch, wrapped in a thick blanket that swallowed half her body. Her eyes were fixed on the fire. The flames danced across the room, reflecting in her gray-blue irises like restless thoughts she couldn't name. At her feet, Shadow lay still, head resting on his paws, but his breathing was uneven and his muscles twitched from time to time, as if haunted by unseen commands. Across from them, Sheriff Marcus Harlan sat at his desk, staring at a half-empty mug and the open file before him. The pages contained reports from the FBI about the Aurora Project, though most of the text had been redacted. Only fragments remained legible, phrases like neurological conditioning, chemical stimulus trials, and subject recall instability. The words felt like ghosts crawling off the paper. Marcus leaned back, rubbing the bridge of his nose. His reflection in the dark window looked older than he remembered, lined, worn, and tired. When the floor creaked behind him, he turned to see Dr. Lena Brooks standing there, holding a thermos of coffee. "Still up?" she asked gently. "Sleep feels like a luxury these days," Marcus muttered. Lena poured coffee into his mug, the steam curling between them. "You're trying to piece together what's left of Aurora, aren't you?" "Trying," he said, "but half of it's locked behind clearance levels I don't have, and the half I can read makes no damn sense. What kind of project uses dogs like Shadow for biochemical warfare?" Lena sighed, sitting on the edge of the desk. "The kind that starts with good intentions and ends with fear. Aurora began as a rescue enhancement program. They wanted dogs who could detect toxins, survive exposure, save lives where humans couldn't go. But then the funding shifted from defense to research command. Reiner pushed the limits. He believed you couldn't create a savior without giving it the power to destroy." Marcus frowned. "Reiner? You knew him?" Lena's eyes darkened. "Only by reputation. Brilliant, obsessive, dangerous. After his wife died in a lab accident, something in him broke. He blamed the government for covering it up. After that, the project started getting twisted." A low whine broke the tension. They turned toward Shadow. The dog's body trembled, claws digging into the rug. Clara was kneeling beside him, whispering softly, "It's okay, Shadow. You're safe. You're home." Lena knelt beside them. "He's dreaming, if you can call it that. His brain. Waves might still react to the trigger patterns he was trained under, like soldiers reliving combat." Marcus felt a sting in her words. "He's not the only one who dreams like that," he said quietly. Lena looked at him, understanding flickering in her eyes. "You still see the fire, don't you? The night you lost them." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Every damn time I close my eyes." For a moment, the only sound was the fire's crackle. Then Shadow's eyes snapped open. He bolted upright, panting, amber gaze sharp as a blade. His head turned toward the window, ears twitching, hackles rising. Clara gasped. "What's wrong?" Shadow growled low, stepping toward the door. Marcus followed his gaze. Outside, through the falling snow, he saw the faint reflection of red light, flashing intermittently like the tracking beacon from the alley. Marcus reached for his sidearm. "Stay here." But before he could move, Shadow darted forward, nose pressed to the crack of the door. He barked once, short, sharp, urgent. Then he turned to Clara and whined, as if telling her to follow. "Marcus," Lena said, tension in her voice. "If someone's watching, I'll find out," he said, pulling on his coat. He stepped outside. The cold hit him like knives. The forest beyond the house swayed under the wind. He swept his flashlight across the snow. Nothing, just pine shadows and falling white. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was watching. When he returned, Clara was holding Shadow's face in her hands. "He's scared," she whispered. "He's never scared." Lena crouched, examining the dog again. "His pupils are dilating abnormally. It's like he's sensing something we can't. Clara, when you found him, do you remember where?" Clara thought for a moment. "By the old railway tunnel, near the ridge. There was smoke coming from inside that day, but I thought it was from a campfire. Shadow was already there, hurt and bleeding. He looked at me like he already knew me." Lena exchanged a look with Marcus. "That tunnel leads toward the Silver Ridge facility, one of Aurora's old sites." Marcus's expression hardened. "Then that's where Reiner was." A sudden buzz came from the radio on his desk. Marcus picked it up. "Harlan here. Sheriff, it's Deputy Miller. We've got movement near the North Road. Someone broke into the old logistics depot, left behind chemical drums marked A9. Marcus's blood ran cold. "Aurora 9? Lena's voice trembled. "That's the gas, the same compound that killed the researchers." He grabbed his coat. "I'm going." "I'm coming with you," Lena said. "You're staying," he shot back. "You're the only one who understands that toxin if something goes wrong." Before she could argue, Clara stood up. "Then I'm coming." "Not a chance," Marcus said. "She's right," Lena interrupted softly. "If Shadow's reacting to something from the project, he might lead you to whatever Reiner left behind." Marcus stared at the girl, frail but unflinching. Fine, but you stay in the car. Both of you? The drive to Silver Ridge was silent except for the wind and the hum of the tires on snow. The forest loomed dark on either side of the road, branches heavy with frost. When they reached the base of the mountain, Marcus killed the headlights. There, Lena whispered. A faint glow seeped from beneath a sheet of ice, an entrance half buried by snow and debris. They stepped out. The air stung with a chemical tang that made Marcus's eyes water. Inside the tunnel, frost-covered pipes lined the walls. Rusted signs read, "Aurora Test Zone, Restricted Access." Shadow sniffed the ground, then growled softly. They followed him deeper, flashlights cutting through the dark. The tunnel opened into a cavernous chamber filled with broken lab equipment and shattered glass. At the center, a recording device blinked weakly. Lena bent down, pressed play. A distorted voice filled the room, male, trembling between rage and grief. They said her death was necessary, collateral. My wife wasn't collateral. I tried to save them from their sin. I will make them remember. I will make them see. Then static. Clara flinched. Who was that? Reiner, Lena whispered. Before Marcus could reply, a faint rumble shook the ground. The air thickened with the sharp, acidic scent of chemicals. Gas leak, Marcus shouted. Get out! The tunnel burst into chaos. A metal beam fell, blocking the exit. Flames licked through the debris. Smoke filled the air. Clara coughed, eyes watering. Shadow barked once, then lunged forward, grabbing her jacket and dragging her toward a narrow side tunnel. Marcus pulled Lena up as the fire roared behind them. The heat scorched his face, and he could barely see through the smoke. Shadow, this way, Clara cried. The dog turned, barking at them until they followed. His fur was singed and his breathing harsh, but he didn't stop. They stumbled through the side passage and burst out into the snow, collapsing in the cold air. The facility burned below, a pillar of black smoke curling into the night sky. Marcus looked around. Reiner? Gone, Lena said between gasps. He must have escaped before the blast. Shadow whimpered and lay down, his paw burned, eyes closing. Clara dropped to her knees beside him, tears freezing on her cheeks. You did it, boy. You saved us, she whispered. Marcus looked at the fire below, his reflection flickering in the inferno. And started something we're not ready to finish. The flames reflected off the snow, painting the world in orange and red, a haunting beauty that neither mercy nor madness could erase. The mountains slept under a sheet of frost, silent except for the low moan of the wind. Silver Ridge, once the crown jewel of scientific ambition, now stood as a mausoleum of broken glass and ash. Snow fell over the ruins where the Aurora facility had collapsed the night before. Columns of smoke drifted into the dawn sky like the last breath of something too proud to die quietly. Down the slope, inside the temporary command tent, Sheriff Marcus Harlan studied the rescue map laid across a table. His eyes were red from exhaustion. The explosion had shaken half the valley, and though the fire had burned out, the air still carried the chemical tang of Aurora 9, the weapon they had failed to contain. Across from him, Dr. Lena Brooks was wrapping bandages around Shadow's foreleg. The dog lay on a blanket, ribs rising and falling weakly, his fur singed at the tips. He was alive, barely. Clara sat beside him, her small hand resting on his neck, whispering to him as if her voice could will him to stay. You're going to be okay, Shadow, she murmured. You have to be. Lena gave a faint smile. He's strong, Clara. He's built to survive worse than this. But he's not built to hurt anymore, the girl said, looking up. He's done fighting. Marcus overheard the words. Something inside him twisted. A memory of his daughter's voice, of her saying almost the same thing before the fire took her. He turned away, swallowing hard. We found something, he said gruffly, pointing to the map. A secondary access tunnel beneath the ridge might lead to Reiner's escape route. Lena looked up. You think he's still alive? I know it, Marcus replied. The explosion was controlled, too clean to be accidental. He wanted us to see it burn. Before anyone could answer, the flap of the tent opened. Agent Nora Hale entered, pale but steady on her feet. Her arm was in a sling, and there were dark circles under her eyes, but her voice carried the calm of someone who had lived too long in danger to fear it anymore. Sheriff, she greeted curtly, I heard you pulled me out of the fire. Thank you. Don't thank me, Marcus said. Thank the kid and her dog. Nora's gaze softened when she looked at Clara. Then I owe you two a life. Clara shook her head shyly. It wasn't me. It was him. Nora crouched beside Shadow, brushing a gloved hand along his neck. When her fingers touched the metallic tag behind his ear, her expression shifted. K9AU91, she whispered. I remember this one. He was Reiner's prototype, the most responsive subject. I thought he died in containment. He didn't, Lena said quietly. He just found a better master. Nora stood, glancing at Marcus. We found more than a tunnel. The explosion uncovered a storage wing below the mountain. It's sealed, but the radiation sensors picked up something. Could be chemical residue, or another. Stockpile of Aurora 9. Marcus straightened. Then we move fast. If that gas leaks, it'll kill every living thing from here to Pine Creek. Lena frowned. We can't go in blind. The air down there will be toxic. I'll go, Nora said. I have the clearance and the training. You're barely on your feet, Marcus countered. Then you'll need me to guide you, she said evenly. Reiner designed the place. I know how he thinks. Marcus hesitated, then nodded. Fine. But we go together. They left Clara and Shadow under the care of a medic while the rescue team prepared. Clara protested, clutching Shadow's paw. Please, Sheriff, don't let them take him away again. Marcus knelt beside her. No one's taking him, sweetheart. We're just making sure no one else gets hurt. Clara's eyes shimmered with tears. He doesn't like dark places. He remembers things there. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. So do I, he said softly. That's why I have to go. By midday, the search team reached the lower tunnel. The entrance gaped like a wound in the earth, framed by scorched pine and twisted steel. Inside, frost had begun to creep along the walls, coating the broken pipes and shattered glass with a glimmer of deceptive beauty. Nora led the way, flashlight in hand, her voice echoing faintly. The main control room should be 200 meters in. That's where Reiner stored his personal data logs. Marcus followed close behind, his gun drawn, while Lena carried a sensor unit that beeped rhythmically in the dim air. Levels are rising, she warned. If it spikes, we turn back. The deeper they went, the heavier the air became. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber lined with broken consoles and overturned desks. Chemical drums were scattered across the floor, some leaking faint vapors that shimmered in the light. On one of the walls, a recording device blinked. Nora pressed the button. A voice filled the cavern, low, rasping, unmistakably human. I once believed science could redeem us, but faith is the only experiment that never fails. When they took her from me, I begged God to return her. He stayed silent. So, I became his silence. It was Dr. Reiner's voice, haunted and calm at once. Lena's hand trembled. He's lost his mind. Marcus stared at the speaker. No, he's lost his faith. Before they could respond, a faint hum filled the chamber. From the far end, a door slid open, revealing a figure in a chemical suit. His mask was cracked, revealing a face lined with burn scars, eyes hollow but alive. Dr. Reiner stepped forward, holding a small control device glowing faint blue. You shouldn't have come, he said softly. Nora raised her gun. Reiner, it's over. He smiled faintly. Over? No, you're standing in the beginning. Lena's voice shook. You set the explosion. You wanted us here. I wanted witnesses, Reiner said. They buried my wife's death under the word accident. Aurora was meant to cure, not kill. They twisted it. So I'll show them what they've done. Marcus took a cautious step forward. You release that gas, you'll kill thousands, including the girl who found you. That's not justice, Reiner. That's vengeance. Reiner's eyes flickered with something fragile. Pain, regret, memory. You think I want to hurt them? I just want the truth to be seen. Sometimes the only way to wake the blind is through fire. The control device in his hand beeped. Vapor began to hiss from one of the cracked drums. Reiner! Nora shouted, but the air was already turning thick and gray. Marcus lunged forward, tackling him. The control slipped from Reiner's hand, clattering across the floor. Nora dashed toward the console, trying to override the release. Lena coughed, eyes watering as the chemical mist spread. In the chaos, Reiner pushed Marcus back, snarling, "You can't stop this. The world has to remember." Then a sound broke through, the echo of footsteps and a single desperate bark. Shadow. The dog burst into the chamber, limping but determined, dragging his injured paw through the smoke. Clara followed behind him, her scarf pulled over her face. "No!" Marcus shouted. "Clara, get out!" But she didn't listen. Shadow lunged toward Reiner, knocking him to the ground. The doctor froze, staring into the dog's eyes. For a long moment, man and creature just looked at each other, the creator and what he'd made. "Still loyal," Reiner whispered, "even when freed." Clara coughed violently. "Please stop. You're hurting everyone." Something in her voice shattered him. His grip loosened. He looked at the gas swirling around them, the haze rising like ghosts, and then at the child before him. "My wife used to sound like that," he murmured. With trembling hands, Reiner reached for the console. "Get them out," he said. Then he hit the emergency release. The ceiling vents roared open, sucking the gas upward into containment shafts. The light turned from sickly gray to pale gold as sunlight pierced through the cracks above. Reiner slumped to his knees, eyes distant. "It's done," he whispered. "Maybe now she'll forgive me." The control room fell silent except for the wind rushing through the vents. When Marcus reached him, Reiner was still, the faintest smile frozen on his scarred face. Nora lowered her weapon. "He saved them in the end." Marcus looked toward Clara and Shadow, who lay side by side, coughing but alive. "Maybe faith found him again," he said quietly. Outside, the storm broke, sunlight spilling over the snow-covered valley. The mountain seemed to exhale, its white slopes glinting with light, like redemption written in ice. The wind had stilled over Mountain Hollow, but the quiet it left behind was uneasy, too heavy, too aware. The storm had passed, yet the air smelled faintly of chemicals and ash. From the ridge above the town, smoke still curled from the ruins of Aurora's lab, like the ghost of a secret that refused to fade. Inside the sheriff's office, Marcus Harlan stared at the corkboard wall crowded with photographs, maps, and scribbled notes. He'd pinned everything he knew about Dr. Reiner, every clue, every consequence. But the board looked like a graveyard of half-answers. Reiner's body had never been recovered. Some said he died when the containment vents blew open. Marcus wasn't so sure. A soft voice broke the silence. "You're thinking he's still out there." Marcus turned. Agent Nora Hale leaned against the doorframe, a bandage on her temple and a calm weariness in her eyes. "You've been staring at that wall for hours." "I've seen men die before," Marcus said. Reiner didn't look like one of them. He looked like a man who'd finally made peace. With God or with guilt, I don't know which. Nora crossed the room. "Maybe peace is all he wanted." Marcus sighed. "If that's true, why is someone trying to finish what he started?" He handed her a photo that had arrived that morning, taken by a satellite drone. It showed a series of power surges near the weather station by the river, 20 miles east. The facility was old and unmanned, but now there were signs of movement, heat signatures, and energy spikes. Nora frowned. "The perfect place to disperse a toxin into the air." "Exactly," Marcus said. "And Lena's missing." Her eyes widened. "What?" "She was supposed to check in at dawn. Her truck was found abandoned 5 miles from the river." Nora clenched her jaw. "Then whoever's behind this has her." Marcus nodded grimly. "We go tonight." Hours later, the snow returned, not in anger this time, but as a curtain that muffled every sound. Marcus drove through the valley with headlights off, trusting instinct and memory more than sight. Beside him, Nora checked her weapon in silence. In the back seat, Clara Wren clutched her scarf tightly. Shadow pressed against her leg. "You sure you want to do this, kid?" Marcus asked without turning. Clara looked out the window, voice steady. "Lena's my friend. Shadow can find her. He always does." Marcus met Nora's gaze in the rearview mirror. The agent gave a small nod. "If the girl stays close, she'll be fine. We'll need the dog anyway." The old weather station appeared through the snow like a mirage. Rusted towers, shattered antennas, and a single main building half buried under ice. The wind moaned through the open vents, carrying the faint smell of metal and something else, something acrid, chemical, familiar. Marcus cut the engine. "We go in quiet." Shadow jumped out. First, nose to the ground. His injured paw had healed enough for movement, though he still limped slightly. His tail stayed low, his ears alert. He sniffed the air and growled softly. "Easy, boy," Clara whispered. "We'll find her." They crept through the snow toward the entrance. Inside, flickering fluorescent lights cast long shadows across the hallway. Broken monitors hummed with static. At the far end, they heard it, the echo of a woman's voice. "Marcus?" "Lena." He ran forward, gun raised, but stopped short when he saw her. Dr. Lena Brooks sat on the floor, wrists bound, a bruise on her cheek. Beside her stood a man in a heavy coat, his face hidden by a hood. He held a small metallic canister glowing faintly blue. "Step away," the man ordered. His voice was calm, deliberate. Marcus's stomach dropped. "Reiner?" The man pulled down his hood. It was him. The scars were deeper, the eyes darker, but there was no mistaking him. "You should have left this buried," Reiner said quietly. "I told you. I wanted witnesses. Now you'll see the ending." Nora moved in beside Marcus, gun aimed steady. "You're not doing this again." Reiner ignored her, turning the canister slowly in his hand. "This is the final synthesis, Aurora 9 refined. One breath of it, and the body burns from within while the mind stays awake. A poetic end for those who built it." Lena struggled against her bindings. "You don't have to do this, Reiner. Your wife wouldn't have wanted it." Reiner's face twisted. "My wife wanted truth. She wanted them to answer for what they made me do." Marcus stepped closer. "Killing more people won't bring her back." Reiner hesitated. His hand trembled. Then a sound pierced the tension. Shadow's growl. The dog crept from behind the pipes, eyes fixed on Reiner. For a heartbeat, Reiner's expression softened. "You again?" he murmured. "My perfect creation, my last failure." Shadow barked once, low and deliberate. The sound echoed through the metal corridors. Clara stepped into view beside him. "Please," she said, "let her go. Let all of us go." Reiner's gaze fell on her, and something flickered. Recognition, grief, humanity. "You shouldn't be here, child." "I found Shadow," she said, tears forming in her eyes. "He was hurt and scared. He didn't need orders. He needed kindness. That's what you forgot." For a long moment, no one moved. The air felt alive, pulsing with both danger and mercy. Then, shouting outside, the sound of boots crunching on snow. Police sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Reiner's head snapped up. "They followed you!" Nora cursed. "Backup's early." Reiner tightened his grip on the canister. "Then this ends now." He pressed the trigger. A hiss filled the room as the canister cracked open, spilling pale vapor into the air. Nora fired instinctively. Her bullet struck the device, sending it clattering across the floor. The canister rolled toward a heater vent, leaking faster. The vapor spread like mist, glowing faintly under the flickering lights. Marcus grabbed Clara, pulling her back. "Get out!" he shouted. But Shadow didn't move. He lunged toward the canister, grabbed it in his jaws, and sprinted toward the open maintenance hatch. Clara screamed after him, but it was too late. Shadow threw the device down the shaft. The explosion muffled as it detonated below. The shockwave knocked them to the ground. When the smoke cleared, Reiner lay bleeding, struck by debris. The lab was collapsing around them. Lena crawled to his side. "You saved them," she whispered. Reiner's lips twitched into a faint smile. "No, the dog did. Maybe that's how grace works." His eyes softened, unfocused. "Tell her. I kept my promise." Then his hand went still. The roof groaned above them. Marcus lifted Clara, carrying her through the falling debris. Nora supported Lena as they stumbled out into the snow. Behind them, the weather station erupted in flames, an orange bloom lighting the sky. Shadow lay in the snowbank outside, coughing weakly, his fur streaked with soot. Clara ran to him, dropping to her knees. "You did it, boy," she whispered, stroking his head. "You saved us again." The dog exhaled slowly, eyes closing. Marcus knelt beside them, his voice rough. "He's breathing. Let's get him home." As the fire burned behind them, the first flakes of new snow began to fall, soft, clean, forgiving. For the first time in years, Marcus bowed his head and whispered a prayer. not for vengeance, but for peace. Spring came late to Mountain Hollow, as if the valley itself hesitated to believe in warmth again. The snow lingered in the shadows, melting slowly into silver streams that ran through the hills and down toward the churchyard. Days stretched longer, nights grew quieter. For the first time in years, the wind that swept across the mountains carried no scent of smoke, no echo of explosions, only pine, rain, and new beginnings. Sheriff Marcus Harlan stood at the edge of the meadow just beyond town, his coat fluttering in the cool morning breeze. Before him, the field was green again, scattered with wildflowers brave enough to bloom over the scars left by winter. It had been 3 months since the night at the weather station, 3 months since Dr. Reiner's final act, since the blinding flash of fire that had sealed the past inside the mountain. He had seen many kinds of death in his life, but none as peaceful as Reiner's. There had been no rage, no defiance, only release. Marcus still remembered the man's last words. Maybe that's how grace works. Behind him, the sound of laughter rose from the open field. Clara Wren, now stronger and healthier than when he'd first met her, was running barefoot through the grass. Her once hollow cheeks were flushed with color, her tangled hair now tied back with a ribbon Lena had given her. In her hands, she held a kite of red and gold, its tail fluttering like firelight against the sky. Beside her bounded Shadow, the German shepherd who had become something of a local legend. His left side still bore faint scars beneath his sable and silver fur, but his steps were sure, his eyes bright. Each bark echoed across the meadow, carried by the wind as if heaven itself listened. "Don't let it dive too low," Marcus called, smiling despite himself. "I won't," Clara shouted back. "Shadow's helping me." Marcus watched as the kite climbed higher, tracing a red streak across the wide blue sky. For a moment, he imagined his daughter Emma's laughter echoing somewhere in the air, mixing with Clara's. His heart, long sealed in silence, beat with something like gratitude. At the far end of the meadow stood a small crowd gathered around a podium, local officers, a few townsfolk, and members of the Rescue Services Division. A banner stretched above them, reading, K9 of Honor Ceremony, Mountain Hollow. Dr. Lena Brooks stood near the podium, dressed in a simple gray coat, her hair pulled back neatly. Time had not erased the fatigue from her eyes, but it had replaced it with quiet conviction. When she saw Marcus approach, she smiled. "You're on time for once, Sheriff." "Don't spread that rumor," Marcus said dryly. Nora Hale, standing beside Lena, chuckled. The agent looked healthier now. No sling, no bandages, only a faint scar across her temple that glinted like silver under the sun. "It suits you, though," she teased. "Being early. Maybe you're finally learning how to enjoy peace." "Don't push it," Marcus said, though the edge in his tone had softened. Lena handed him a small folder. "These are the commendations. You'll present the award." He glanced at her. "You sure? You were the one who kept everyone alive afterward." She shook her head. "No. You were the one who found faith again. That counts for more." Marcus exhaled, then looked toward the crowd. Clara and Shadow were making their way up the hill, the kite now trailing behind them like a fiery ribbon. The girl clutched a small envelope in her hand, the speech she'd written with Lena's help. When she reached the stage, she looked up at Marcus nervously. Do I stand here?" He smiled gently. "Right there's perfect." The ceremony began with quiet applause. The mayor gave a brief introduction, followed by Nora reading a few words about courage and compassion. Then Marcus stepped forward, holding the polished medal engraved with the words K9 of Honor, Shadow, Aurora Unit AU-91. He cleared his throat. "Most of you already know this story. A girl lost in a storm, a dog with a past darker than any of us understood, and a town that learned what grace really means. When we found Shadow, he wasn't just a rescue dog. He was a reminder that even when we build things meant for war, sometimes God still finds a way to use them for mercy." He turned toward Clara, his voice softening. "This medal doesn't belong to a machine or a soldier. It belongs to a soul. And sometimes, souls wear fur." Clara's eyes glistened as Marcus knelt to place the medal around Shadow's neck. The dog tilted his head, then barked once, loud enough to make everyone laugh. Cameras flashed. Someone cheered. For a few seconds, the world felt lighter. After the ceremony, the crowd lingered, people taking photos, shaking hands, telling stories. Lena and Nora moved among them, speaking quietly about opening a new animal rescue center in town, the Snowlight Haven. It would be a sanctuary for injured service dogs and strays, funded by donations made in memory of those lost to the Aurora Project. As the sun began to sink behind the mountains, the last rays turned the snowcaps golden. Clara sat on the grass, Shadow's head in her lap, tracing the metal with her small fingers. "Do you think he's watching?" she asked. Marcus sat beside her. "Who?" "Dr. Reiner." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "If he found peace, then yes. And maybe your mom's watching too." Clara smiled faintly. "I think Shadow sees them sometimes." The dog stirred, gazing toward the horizon where the light softened into pale amber. His ears twitched, and for a moment, Marcus thought he heard something, like distant wind chimes carried on the breeze. The church bell rang in the distance, gentle and clear. Its echo rolled through the hills, over the valley, across the town. The sound reached the small cemetery on the ridge, where a new headstone stood beside two older ones. The inscription was simple: Dr. Henry Reiner. He tried to warn them. Lena had placed wildflowers there that morning, yellow and white. She believed in redemption, even for the broken. Later that evening, as the sky dimmed to purple, Clara stood outside the cabin with Marcus. The meadow glowed under the moonlight. "Do you ever think," she said softly, "that God lets storms happen so we can learn how to find the light?" Marcus looked at her, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. "Maybe that's the only way we ever really see it." Shadow patted closer, nudging Clara's hand. Together, they watched as a flock of birds took flight over the valley, tiny shapes crossing the moon. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled. The Bible Marcus had once left untouched now lay open on the table. A verse marked in pencil read, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." The camera of the heart would linger there, on the man, the girl, and the dog framed against the gentle snowmelt, on the quiet miracle that sometimes comes not with thunder, but with warmth. As dawn approached, the meadow glowed once more. Clara's kite rested against the fence, red and gold like the first light of morning. Somewhere in that light, every scar of winter began to fade, and so it was written. There are miracles that don't announce themselves with thunder or flame. They come like melting snow, quiet and slow, but enough to warm an entire heart. Sometimes God does not stop the storm, but He sends someone to walk through it with us. In this story, Clara, Marcus, and Shadow remind us that miracles are not always loud or sudden. Sometimes they come softly through loyalty, forgiveness, and love that refuses to give up. In our own lives, we all face winters of fear and doubt, but if we keep faith, God will lead us to the light waiting beyond the snow. Share this story with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment. Subscribe for more stories of faith and courage. And may God bless you and your family with peace and healing. Type Amen if you believe that His miracles still happen every day.